Hello and welcome back to the Property Pilot. Today we'll be talking about what type of properties to buy for investments. Okay, so welcome back. Today we're talking about what type of properties you should buy when investing in property. To answer this question, we need to talk about two different spectrums in property investing. And once we've spoken about these ideas and strategies, then I can tell you what types of properties that you should be buying, for example, semi-detached or back-to-backs or flats. So let's talk about these two concepts and strategies first of all. The first is actually investing in property for income. So the reason you're investing in property is to generate maybe a monthly income, some monthly cash flow, right? And if that's your motive and that's your reason and the strategy why you want to get into property, there's certain property types that are best suited to this strategy. However, let's flip this on the other side. Maybe you actually want to get into property. You're bothered about the income, but you're not that bothered about the short-term monthly income. What you really want is the capital appreciation on not even an annual basis, but over a 5, 10, 20, 30 year period. You're getting into property because you want to build a legacy and a portfolio for your family, something that you can pass down and hand down to your children. And if that's the reason you want to get into property, not so much income right now, but capital appreciation and building that value, again, there are very specific types of properties that you should consider purchasing to actually realize that strategy. So let's come back over here, let's talk about income, which to be honest is, I'd say, probably about 60 to 70% of why people are getting into property, because they want to generate an income for themselves. Maybe they want to generate, what they're earning right now in their 9-to-5 job, but they want to do it in a more passive manner through property. So what properties should you be buying? Okay, well, here's my opinion. And, I've actually done income investing through property myself, and I can tell you what works really well for me. So typically, when you're actually buying investment property for income, you're going to have a higher yield, of course, because that yield is essentially what pays you out on a monthly and annual basis. Whereas if you're buying property over here for the capital appreciation, your yield will typically be slightly lower. However, the capital appreciation and the values of that property over time will typically be much higher than the properties you're buying for income over here. So for those of you who don't know what yield is calculated by the annual rent of a property over the purchase price. So again, if we're undergoing property for income, then we want to have a nice high yield, because that high yield is going to ensure that we're getting a nice chunk of cash every single month. And typically, what type of properties actually give yourself a high yield is, take England for example, the north of England. Typically you get higher yields in the north than in the south. Now, what type of properties are these? They could be 1 or 2 bed back-to-backs. They could be, on a larger scale, a block of flats, or maybe they could be a HMO. All these three types of properties typically give higher yields. Now, as a result of this, normally their capital appreciation isn't as high as the property types over here that we'll be coming onto very shortly. And normally the properties over here that we buy for income, the back-to-backs, maybe a house of multiple occupancy, they're typically a little bit more time to manage. It takes a bit more time, and in terms of the maintenance, it actually costs a little bit more as well. And I kind of go into why that is. So let's take the HMO example. So, when I got into property, I really started with HMOs. I loved HMOs, and they were great because it gave you a really nice income. You're going to make far more from a HMO than you would do if you're buying and letting out a nice flat in the city centre. Now, HMOs are great because it gives you more cash, but they're more hassle as well. It takes more time to manage the HMO. You're having tenants check in and check out far more often than you would do someone living in a city centre flat. Also, the maintenance to upkeep the HMO is more expensive than someone living in a city centre flat as well. Every 6 or 12 months when the tenant comes out, typically speaking, a light refresh is required. Or because the kitchen and the lounge areas get so much use, again, because the more people living in the property, it takes a little bit more to maintain it. So that's the kind of type of properties that I'd consider purchasing if you want income. HMOs, a block of flats, that's on the kind of big scale, and back-to-backs, 1 or 2 bed back-to-back terraces, they're quite good. And the nice thing about 1 or 2 bed back-to-backs is they're not as much hassle and time to manage as a HMO. HMO, as I said before, you've got several tenants moving in and out. With a single let back-to-back, you could have a tenant in there for 2 or 3 years. Now, that's all well and good, and this is, I'd say, probably compromises of 60 to 70% of my portfolio is all about income, and that's really important to me, so I can spend my days doing whatever I want to do. But then let's flip over to the capital side. So if you want to buy property for capital growth, Maybe you're not that bothered about the income. It's still nice to have the income, but you don't particularly need it. And what you want to grow is a nice portfolio over time with properties that are typically easier to manage. Now, what type of properties should we be purchasing over here? Well, as I've already mentioned, a flat in a city centre may not be a bad idea, and I'll tell you why this is. Flats in city centres historically tend to go up in value higher than 1 or 2 bed back-to-backs. Now, that's great, obviously, for the long term and the capital appreciation, but also those tenants that are living in those flats typically stay there a bit longer as well. Therefore, it's less time and it's less hassle for you to manage and maintain. Furthermore, the flat that you probably bought is actually going to probably be in a better condition than the 1 or 2 bed back-to-back you bought over here. Now, some of the time this isn't true, but I can tell you from experience, most of the time this flat will be in a better condition and it will require less money to upkeep, which again is a positive. What other types of property should you consider buying over here? Well, a 3-bed semi-detached property would be great, in a nice area, where families live and where people actually own the homes themselves. That's a really good investment. Your yield won't be great, which means you're not making that much cash, but that's not why we're doing this. We're doing this for the long term. We want the values to increase. That's why we're doing it. And you can get a really nice family and they could have been there for 10 years. Now, of course, ensure that you're increasing the rent, every year, or at least in line with inflation so it's fair on everyone. But, they could be in there for the long term. And after 10 years, you could have a property that's worth maybe double the value that it was when you initially purchased it. And what you'll often find is over here in this capital growth strategy, even though you're making less cash on a monthly basis, that capital growth is actually normally higher than the cash you're making on the income side here. So if you don't need that income and you want to invest in property, consider actually undertaking the capital growth investment strategy where you invest in nice areas and different types of property, because typically speaking that will yield a higher return. Okay, you can't access that money as quick as you could over here because you're getting a nice fat part of cash every single month, but over the long term you'll be making more money, typically speaking. Another example of a property over here to purchase for long-term capital growth are detached bungalows. Bungalows are actually in really high demand. We're an aging population, and as people reach a certain age in their life, they'll want to downsize from their nice 4 or 5 bed detached house with 2 floors, and they want a 3 or 2 bed bungalow. And this trend, I believe anyway, is going to be only going to increase further as our aging population gets older and becomes a larger percentage of what our population actually is. So consider investing in these bungalows, and even better if you could find a rundown bungalow, which there are many, a really tired and distressed bungalow, and you could renovate that and it's in a great area. Well, I think that's going to be an amazing opportunity, because A, you're going to be adding value straight away to the property, and you can hopefully pocket that difference from what you buy it for and spend on it to what it's valued at. But then B, in the long run, in the 5, 10, the 20 years time, that capital appreciation is going to be another double whammy. So that's a really good strategy that I certainly look for, and that's what I help my students undergo as well. Detached bungalows are absolutely fantastic, and the thing is, you'll find loads of these because, unfortunately, put yourself in the position of an elderly person. They've downsized to a bungalow, unfortunately they've passed away, and maybe they've been living in that bungalow for 10 or 20 years and they haven't done much to it in those 10 or 20 years. So it needs someone to come in with some imagination and with some skill set to actually start from scratch again, renovate the bungalow, get it to a very good spec, and rent it or even sell it on. So to recap, we've spoken about 2 concepts that really we need to decide which strategy we're going to be undergoing. Is it income investing, or is it capital growth and the longer term part of the property portfolio cycle? So once you've answered the question and understand where you are in that strategy, only then can you understand what types of properties to purchase. So over here, we've spoken about back-to-backs, 1 or 2 bed back-to-backs, HMOs, maybe a block of flats on the large scale. But then over here, we've spoken about 3 bed semis, city centre flats, and detached properties. So again, I hope this video has provided you value and you've got something from this today. If you haven't already subscribed, I would like you to consider subscribing. There's some really great content planned upcoming on the channel very shortly. And again, very soon I'll be announcing a special flight giveaway, which I'm not going to go into now, even though I really want to. So stay tuned to the channel and enjoy your day.